Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special. It is our pleasure to welcome on the show Montek Singh Ahluwalia. So thanks very much for joining us on the show. And it's been a while since we've spoken with you, so I'm glad to have you back on the channel. Let me start by asking you about a comment that you made. You said that there's a class of 3 or 4 bad ideas that keep coming back irrespective of who's in power. If I were to put that question to you and ask you about which of these 3 or 4 ideas that currently worry you, that seem to have made a return, what would those be?
Oh, I haven't thought about it. I was thinking about that more in terms of looking at the development experience in general. And I think, some of those bad ideas, which we had listed in the Growth Commission. For example, we had said, in general, the idea that expanding fiscal deficits in a manner where it doesn't matter what you do is a bad idea. Now, fortunately, from our point of view, the central government fiscal deficit is in reasonably good shape. I don't know what the position is regarding state governments. Now, too often in India, all the sort of wisdom on economics is directed at the central government. But we now have a situation where the state governments have a much larger economic footprint, including a macroeconomic footprint. And I don't know how much of this wisdom is being directed at them. I mean, how many chief ministers actually worry that they should be living to a reasonably tight fiscal deficit? I think that's a very important issue. I mean, another bad idea which we had talked about a lot is the notion that by closing off the economy, you could somehow protect yourself and get a good industrial growth. Exceptionally bad idea. Fortunately, we've not been, and we had several governments, and by and large, India has remained open and getting a little bit more open. Many people would say that we are less open than we should be, but certainly there's been no reversal in that. In the rest of the world, the news is actually not so good because you keep hearing noises. Even there are noises rather than actual action. So that's another issue. Are we going to remain open? And are we going to integrate much more effectively with, let's say, the rest of Asia? Now, right now, as you know, the RCEP discussions are going on. And I mean, I'm a little disappointed that there are many NGOs protesting against this kind of integration. India is in a strong position in Asia. We're doing well. This is a part of the world which is doing well. And we should actually integrate with the rest of Asia. I don't know whether, for example, our industry is doing enough to convey to the government and to their colleagues and to the public that India stands to benefit from an early and successful conclusion of the RCEP negotiations.
I'll talk to you a little bit more about trade in just a second, but let me pick up on one of the issues that you mentioned, and that is this business of the fiscal deficit. And you're right that the government at the center has been able to hold things together quite well. At the state level, on account of, for instance, the Uday bonds, the situation is different. There are now concerns on what will happen to state finances, post the agricultural loan waivers that have been announced as well. We're also probably going to see the government take up the N.K. Singh Committee report, which suggested reworking the FRBM Act itself. What do you believe needs to be the order of the day when we talk about the new FRBM roadmap?
Well, the N.K. Singh Committee didn't address the states issue. Because, it seems to me that if you're going to look at the FRBM, the fiscal responsibility and budget management, you need to take an integrated view of the center and the states. I broadly agree with the approach of the N.K. Singh Committee on what the targets should be for the center. But they've left out of the whole picture what the targets should be for the states. They've said, let us refer it to the next Finance Commission. And that's a reasonable thing, but the next Finance Commission will report 2 years later. I mean, if you say it's going to be set up very soon. So really, what it means is that for the next couple of years, the only guidepost guiding state deficit limits will be guideposts set under the existing dispensation. And now if those limits are restricted to about 2% of GDP for the states as a whole, that's not so bad. But I don't know whether that is indeed the intention. I don't know whether the states feel they need more room, and that's going to be an issue to resolve.
One of the perhaps in the class of bad ideas is this business of loan waivers. And when you were in government, the Congress did announce loan waivers. This government, after saying that it will not go down the road of announcing loan waivers, is doing that from Maharashtra to Uttar Pradesh. This is not to belittle the distress that we're seeing in the agriculture sector at all, and I think intervention is needed to try and alleviate the pain there. But the hazards of going down this path of waivers once again, what does that mean for our economy?
Well, I'm quite unambiguous on that, in the sense that, yes, there are cases of agricultural distress. We should look at that. And where farmers are really distressed, we should try to do something to take care of their problems. Translating that into a generalized loan waiver is a very bad idea. All that it will do is it will basically undermine the credit culture. I mean, it hasn't been done by the central government, but this is what is another example of the state's footprint becoming larger. And there'll be competitive populism. Some states have done it, others will be pressed to do it. I hope not, because quite honestly, they will take on a burden that's absolutely impossible. And secondly, remember that, you know, the farmers who actually get the loans, all of them are not distressed. Some farmers are distressed. So you're really giving a benefit to a large number of farmers who may not actually need this kind of support. So if it's coming out of the state budgets, maybe a more targeted program to look at the areas where farmers have had problems, maybe an area-based program, maybe something that would provide better water, etc., would have been more productive.
Let me ask you about the GST, because that clearly is an area where the government, through the GST Council, has been able to build consensus. We've got the GST, almost 1 month of the GST rollout now. By and large, it's been a smooth rollout. I know you've been concerned about the multiple rates that we have to deal with, but you know, on balance, do you think that this is perhaps the only way they could have moved forward?
My guess is that's true. I mean, I think it's a major step forward. It's something that's been in the works for several
over a decade,
years.
Yeah.
Yes, different governments, different parties. Anyway, whatever the history, it's a good sign for Indian democracy that in a multi-party system, and also in a system which, because it required a constitutional amendment, it had to go through the Rajya Sabha. It didn't just go through the Rajya Sabha, but it was unanimously passed in the Rajya Sabha. So at least at the national level, all the parties are behind it. I agree that there are too many rates. Even the finance ministry's representatives agree there are too many rates, but apparently the states were a bit too insistent on that. I have elsewhere said that, you know, the best thing for the GST Council to do is to set up an expert group now, so that before, just after the next elections, let's say just after 2019, they are in a position to consider some further convergence, consolidation of the rates. I think that would be a very good idea. You know, there will be glitches. When you do a major change like this, no matter how much hard work you do, here and there'll be problems. My feeling is that as long as the finance ministry takes the view that there may be glitches, but we look at them with an unbiased eye and fix them as soon as we can, I think we should be all right. And from what I hear so far, there have been less problems than people might have thought. Now, occasionally you're going to get the problem where people who are actually outside the direct tax net are not happy with the GST because it kind of forces them to get into the direct tax net. I don't think that's a failure of the GST. That's one of the successes. And the government should sort of stay the course and try and persuade people that, look, there's nothing wrong with complying. But of course, you know, where there are genuine problems, a little bit more time, they should allow that.
So what kind of an impact do you believe both demonetization and GST will have as far as tax compliance is concerned? Because that's the big bet that the government is hoping for. So far, the demonetization impact on tax compliance is questionable. But demonetization plus GST equal to significantly better tax compliance, significantly better revenue.
Well, as you say, I mean, look, demonetization was a one-off affair. You know, unlike what Rogoff was talking about, which is to get rid of large value denominations. We haven't done that. We've actually added a larger value denomination. So let's forget about Demonetization was disruptive. Government felt that it would achieve all kinds of things. You can make up your own mind whether it did or not. GST is so lumping demonetization with GST is not, I think, fair on GST. GST is a well-structured reform that every professional economist that I'm aware of had supported. Parties have got together, and I think that it does produce a major structural change in India. That is that when you got one commodity, it's going to have the same tax across the country. The problem is there are too many tax rates. So different commodities, each one of them will have the same tax, but there are too many tax rates. And there's some parts of it where the multiplicity will create disputes. I mean, for example, if you're going to have one tax rate for shoes below 500 and another one for shoes above 500, you're virtually inviting the possibility of disputes somewhere or the other. I mean, somebody could always say that, look, this has been underpriced or should be classified differently and so on. Well, that's why I feel that they should, having got this done, let's do the best we can, and 3 years down the road, do a better convergence so these problems disappear.